So now we come to chapter 11, Nitya-dharma and Idolatry. So last chapter was entitled Nitya-dharma and History. So we're getting the comparison. And before that, Nitya-dharma and Material Science and Civilization. So in other words, we're hearing about the external aspects, but where does the Nitya-dharma consideration come in? All right, we're going to hear about worshipping Takoji. So that's what is the Nitya-dharma of this process, and what is the Anitya-dharma, or the Nimitic dharma of this process. That's going to be clear, because if we know what is not really Takoji worship, then we can perform our Takoji worship much better if we know what it's not. It's called the Swarup Lakshan and the Tatashta Lakshan. The Tatashta Lakshan is what it isn't, and the Swarup Lakshan is what it is. So the chapter title is Nitya-dharma and Idolatry. On the western bank, that means from where we're sitting, across the Ganga into Navadvip, that's the western bank. On the western bank of the Bhagirati, in the Koladvip district of Navadvip, there is a famous village named Kulia Paharpur. At the time of Sriman Mahaprabhu, a highly respected and influential Vaishnava named Sri Madhavadas Chattopadhyaya, also known as Chakori Chattopadhyaya, lived in that village. Chakori Chattopadhyaya had a son named Sri Vamsivardhan Thakur. By the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Vamsivardhananda had tremendous power and authority. Everyone addressed him as Vamsi Vardhananda Prabhu because they regarded him as an incarnation of Krishna's flute. So this is a reality we can see in the Gaurageshtana Deepika of who is Vamsivardhan. He's the incarnation of Krishna's flute. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is bringing this person into the pastimes that he's describing. He's describing these pastimes because he wants to make a Siddhantic point. So he's bringing all these aspects of the reality of Mahaprabhu's Leela, because the whole book, of course, is set in, or the first section of the book is set in Navadvip and Mahaprabhu's mercy. It's Mahaprabhu's mercy that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is eager to distribute, because this is what is available at this time in history. And this mercy of Mahaprabhu is so unique and special. Krishna didn't give this mercy. He tasted his own prem, but Mahaprabhu has come to Rag Marg Bhakti Loke Korite Prachan. He's come to give all the worlds the mood of this Raganuga Bhakti, or give them an option for it. He's going to open a window, open a door, and it's always up to us, because we always have independence, whether we're going to go through that door or not. So that's in our hand whether we actually walk in there. That will be effective by the strength of our association. If we have healthy association leading us in that direction, then it'll become very simple for us to access the gifts of Mahaprabhu. He was a renowned and special recipient of Sri Vishnu Priya's mercy. Vishnu Priya, her appearance day is in 2 days on Wednesday. So it's very nice that we're hearing her name now in preparation for Wednesday, her appearance day. After Sri Priyaji's disappearance, that means Vishnu Priya's disappearance, Vamsi Prabhu transferred the deity whom she had worshipped from Sri Dham Mayapur, that's the deity of Vishnu Priya, to Kulia Paharpur, and his descendants carried out the service of this deity for some time after that. However, when his descendants obtained the mercy of Sri Janavamata and moved from Kulia Paharpur to Sripat Bhaganpur, the worship of the deity was continued in Kulyagram by the Savites of Malancha.
So the deity,
Huh?
what is the deity?
Sorry?
What is the deity?
This is the deity that we call it Dharmeshwar now.
Dharmeshwar, yeah.
Yes, this
On
is,
the island.
yes, that deity. Kulyagram is situated on the opposite side of the Ganga from Prachina, old Navadvip. So Navadvip used to be on this side. That's where Mahaprabhu took his birth. The Yog Pit is on this side of Ganga Devi, on the eastern side. But we are talking about the western side. This is being described on the western side. So it's saying here that old Navadvip, which is here near Mayapur, in Mayapur. Mayapur is in Navadvip, and at that time included many small settlements, among which Chidadanga and a few others were quite famous. Once a devotee merchant of Chinadanga arranged a spiritual festival in the temple of Kulya Paharpur and issued invitations to many Brahmin Pandits and all the Vaishnavas within the 32 square mile circumference of Navadvip. On the day of the festival, the Vaishnavas came from all directions, each accompanied by their own entourage. Sri Anantadas came from the Sringapali. Gaurachand Das Babaji came from Sri Mayapur, and Sri Narayan Das Babaji came from Sri Bilva Pushkarini. The renowned Naraharidas came from Sri Moduram. Sri Paramahamsa Babaji and Sri Vaishnava Das came from Sri Godaram, and Sachinandan Das came from Sri Samudraga. So if we become familiar with the Gora Mandal, and I can post a nice diagram on our WhatsApp thread, perhaps we can get it on the Facebook thread afterwards also, of the different islands in the shape of a beautiful lotus. And you can see and it's also in the shape of a conch shell simultaneously. The actual blowing hole of the conch shell is right in Mayapur itself. It's the very heart of the mandal. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is so kind. He's giving us the whole picture. He's giving us all the descriptions. He's taking us into this Goradam in such a beautiful, sublime way. The Vaishnavas' foreheads were decorated with vertical tilak markings, Urdhva Pundra, indicating that their bodies were temples of Sri Hari. This Urdhva Pundra means just the tilak that we wear. On their necks they wore tulsi mala, and their limbs looked splendid, being stamped with the names of Sri Gaura Nityananda. Some held Harinam malas in their hands, and others loudly performed Sankirtan of the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. What a beautiful impression. We need some artists to actually depict all this for us and give us a direct impression. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is a very creative personality. We get that feeling actually as we read. Creative in all kinds of ways. We get inspired to support these truths in beautiful, creative ways. So more paintings are needed to fill this, the impression of these chapters. To the accompaniment of mridanga and kartals, and some danced continuously as they moved along, chanting Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. In the bodies of many of the Vaishnavas were seen the external manifestations of ecstasy, because we can be internally ecstatic, but then if it's really true, those internal manifestations will manifest externally in the form of tears and hairs standing on end, etc., trembling of the body. Those anubhavs, they will manifest externally. So he's saying here, was seen, I'll read again. In the bodies of many of the Vaishnavas were seen the external manifestations of ecstasy, such as torrents of tears and hairs standing on end. While weeping, some called out fervently, "O Gaurkishore, when will you grant me a vision of your external pastimes in Navadvip?" Gaurkishore is another name of Sachinandan Gaurahari. It's not our Paramahamsa Mahabhagavat Gaurkishore. It's a name for Mahaprabhu. There were many groups of Vaishnavas who sang Sri Nam with the accompaniment of mridanga and other instruments as they walked. Reminds us of our parikrama parties. We would have parikrama parties previously with my Gurudev, and sometimes there was 15, 20,000 people coming from all over Bengal, all over India, actually. There would be no room for even accommodation to sleep. Everyone would just sleep in the pathways, in the gardens, everyone on all the different, any corner they could find just to rest. But they were huge, huge parikramas. I can remember once timing the parikrama when it was walking past where I was sitting, and it was more than an hour. It was about an hour and 20 minutes for the whole parikrama party just to walk past. So when you get in a thunderous kirtan within a group of Vaishnavas of this nature, it's tremendously inspiring for the heart. And Gorpranim is just around the corner. And during the month of Gorpranim, there are so many Prikrama parties roaming around all the way through this Goromandal everywhere. Sometimes 3 or 4 Parikrama parties come together. And then the crescendo of the kirtan is just like the sky is going to break apart. And it's very, very exhilarating for the shraddha, for the faith of the devotees to appreciate the potency in kirtan, the Sankirtan ras, because Godrum Dweep in particular is the quality of Godrum is Sankirtan ras, is Nam Bhajan, Kirtan. This is the quality of Godrum. So when you hear these kirtan parties coming together, it's colossal. It's really an experience. And your hairs will stand on end because it's so um, powerful. The women of Kulya, who were also bhaktas of Sri Gauranga, became astonished to see these spiritual emotions and praised the spiritual good fortune of the Vaishnavas. Proceeding in this way, the Vaishnavas arrived at the Natya Mandir, the dancing mandir, directly adjacent to the deity's altar. This was where Sriman Mahaprabhu would dance and perform Sankirtan. The merchant who was sponsoring the festival greeted all of them. It's saying very clearly that this is where Mahaprabhu would dance with his kirtan. So the roots, the atmosphere of that kirtan, which is completely coming from Goloka Vrindavan or Swetadweep, is going to be still resonating in the atmosphere. It's like when you go to the yoga pit and you place your head on the ground, you can practically be aware of the magnetic weight of that potency in the yoga pit itself, because Krishna took his birth from that place. It's transcendental. He came from that transcendental spiritual world. So if we're chanting nicely, if we're practicing our sadhana bhajan, we can be aware of the absolute reality of the Lord's pastimes only a few hundred years ago. So it's still reverberating in the atmosphere very powerfully. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying specifically, this was where Sriman Mahaprabhu would dance and perform Sankirtan. The merchant who was sponsoring the festival greeted all of them. As a symbol of submission, he wore a cloth around his neck, and he fell at the Vaishnava's feet, expressing sentiments of great humility. We often see someone who is hosting a program, they'll put a cloth around their neck. It signifies humility, just like Krishna when he returned to the gopis and he sang this beautiful verse, Na pariyeham niravadya, after the gopis had sung their heart-wrenching gopi geet, calling for him. He came in a very humble mood before them. He put his cloth, his pitamba, around his neck, demonstrating this mood of humility. This is what the cloth around the neck signifies. So the merchant is in this capacity. He's acting like that. This is not a karmi merchant. This is a Vaishnava merchant. He's calling all these Vaishnavas for the purpose of increasing his own bhakti. This is the objective. When all the Vaishnavas were seated in the Nata Mandir, the temple Sevites brought prasadam, flower, garlands, and placed them around their necks. This is also very important. They didn't just go to the shop and buy some garlands and then put them all on the devotees' necks. All the garlands had been offered first. My Gurudev would always be very, very insistent on this. Sometimes people would run in with a garland and he knew it wasn't offered. And he would ask, who is this offered from? Who have you given it to? And then we would have to place it in front of Tulsi Devi, offer it to her. Guru only accepts prasadam. He doesn't ever accept anything else except Mahaprasadam. That's all Guru will accept. So you can't offer him any type of bhoga. It all has to be offered first. And then it has potency. Why would a pure devotee want to take anything that has not been offered to Krishna for himself? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes all these particular points as we read it through. He brought prasadam flower garlands and placed them around their necks. The poetic shlokas of Sri Chaitanya Mangal were then melodiously chanted, and upon hearing the ambrosial lila of Sri Chaitanya Dev, these Vaishnavas began to manifest various types of sattvika bhavs. Sattvika bhavs are even higher than anubhavs. A sattvika bhav is when the very elements of the body become touched by the emotions. The emotions are so deep and so moving that these emotions of tears, they horripilation, kampu, what is it? Uh, Stamba, being stunned. There are 8 different stamba, ashru, tears, and this romancha, kampu. These different sattvika bhavs were all being manifest by the Vaishnavas, which is very high. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is taking us right to the top. He's showing us what it's like to live in the world where there are so many pure Vaishnavas that they will exhibit these anubhavs and even sattvika bhavs publicly in an assembly. And I was describing the other day about Bhaktivedanta Srila Trivikram Maharaj, how wherever he went on the parikrama, he would just be weeping and weeping and weeping. This is coming from the very core of his heart. This is an absolute Mahabhagavat who their hearts have become so soft, and when they're remembering the pastimes, great. It's when the heart gets so full that it overflows through the eyes. That's what tears are. It's not like um, the like a mad person. His heart is empty. He doesn't cry because the symptoms of sattvic bhav can sometimes produce externally a mood like what we would call madness materially, but it's a spiritual madness. Unmad, this mood.
What's the difference on the ball and sattvic?
Anubhavs are externally manifested, and the sattvika bhavs, their manifestation is much more significant. The anubhavs are like rolling around on the ground and shouting very, very loudly and having no inhibition about public opinion. These are just some, there's 14 anubhavs or 13 anubhavs, depending on which book you read. There's even described 11 in some places. But these anubhavs is described when the mental quantum is still present, when there's still some cognition, when the mind still kind of knows what's going on, right? But a sattvika bhav, that comprehension or rationale has totally evaporated. There's nothing there. It's just like an electric current has come into you and you're just responding. That's the distinction between anubhav. Anubhav, you still have some mental cognition.
Somewhere it's like involuntary. Sattvic bhava involuntary.
Yes, you can say like that. You're not instigating them. They just come by themselves, involuntary. Yes, you can say like that. Sattvika bhavs. While they were thus absorbed in Prem Ananda, the doorkeeper entered and addressed the authorities of the temple. The chief mullah of Satsaika Paragan is sitting outside the assembly hall with his associates and followers. He requests to have a discussion with some of the Vaishnava Pandits. Can you imagine going from this ecstatic mood and then all of a sudden one mullah from the Muslim community has arrived? We'll see. The temple authorities in turn informed the exalted Pandit Babajis that the mullah had arrived and desired to speak with them. As soon as the Vaishnavas received this news, due to a break in the flow of transcendental rasa, the mood of their assembly became overcast with dejection. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's not like he's saying anything, what do you call it, racist or something crazy like that, you know? It's a fact that when the Vaishnavas are experiencing transcendental rasa, and then a group of people come in who have no connection with transcendental rasa, like the Muslims, then of course those confidential moods have to be restrained and held within the devotees, so they weren't able to actually exhibit their moods. Interesting that this is the third chapter that we're hearing about the Muslims in this Jaiva Dharma, because there are many, many Muslims here. And we need to appreciate what is their philosophy and how, because Mahaprabhu, he gave so much kripa to the Chankazi. And these personalities in Navadvip, they've had that kripa. And we should understand also that most of the Muslims in Bengal, for example, they all were originally Hindus, and they've been what do you call um, uh, changed, to become
Converted.
converted to become Muslims. So they have the seeds or sanskars. All the Muslims here, they all hear the Janmashtami celebrations. They all hear the Hare Krishna mantra practically every single day. They're all hearing all of these transcendental sound vibrations. So they're not like the hardcore Muslims in some countries where they're completely violent practically towards any Hindus or any other type of followers. So there's some distinction here, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur brings this out. Yes, so the assembly became overcast with dejection. Krishnadas Babaji Mahashai of Sri Madhyadweep inquired from the temple authorities, "What is the Mullah Sahib's intention?" Knowing the Mullah's purpose, they replied, "The Mullah Sahib wants to discuss some spiritual matters with the Vaishnava Pandits." They added that the mullah was the foremost amongst Muslim scholars. Remember, I think it was in the third chapter, Lahari Mahashai, he meets, or the fourth chapter, he meets with the Muslims and they have an engagement there. And then again, um, when was the third time? There was another time, second time also. Um, They added that the mullah was the foremost amongst Muslim scholars and was highly respected by the Emperor of Delhi, although always devoted to the promotion of his own religion, because mullah means the um, priest, chief priest of that religion. That's what it means. He was not in the least inimical or belligerent towards other religions. So this is not a confrontational um, desire of the mullah. The temple authorities humbly requested that one or two Vaishnava Pandits should come forward and discuss the Shastra with him to display the preeminence of the sacred Vaishnava Dharma. This was the objective, to share the principles of Vaishnava Dharma. If they're inquiring, like previously, um, the Vaishnavas had been challenged at different times, so they have to respond. In the sixth chapter, when those Pandits go, Chudamani, etc., they question the Vaishnavas, are they following the Mahajans? And then the Vaishnavas are feeling very much slighted because they've been accused of not even following the Mahajans. So they have to go and purify that attack on them. This is when they will engage in debate or conversation. Otherwise, the Vaishnavas don't have any need or necessity for these debates or arguments like that. You understand? Um, some of the Vaishnavas felt inspired to speak with the Mullah Sahib, seeing an opportunity to propound Vaishnava Dharma. In the end, they decided amongst themselves that Gorachand Das Pandit Babaji of Sri Mayapur, Vaishnav Das Pandit Babaji of Sri Godram, Prem Das Babaji of Janunagar, and Kali Pavan Das Babaji of Champahata should discourse with the Mullah Sahib. All the other Vaishnavas could also go to witness their discussion. When the recitation of Sri Chaitanya Mangal was completed, yes, they're going to finish their recitation of Chaitanya Mangal, they would actually regularly sit and read just the beautiful verses. If you listen to someone chanting the Bengali beautiful verses of the Chaitanya Mangal, it's so beautiful and melodic. Hearing this decision, the four Babajis loudly exclaimed, Jai Nityananda, and followed the Mahant into the large courtyard outside the temple. The mullah and his company were seated in the courtyard under the pleasant and cooling shade of a large banyan tree. When they saw the Vaishnavas approaching, the mullah and his party stood up cordially to receive them. Knowing all jivas as servants of Krishna, the Vaishnavas in turn offered dandavats to Sri Vasudev, situated in the heart of the mullah and his associates, and then took their respective seats. So we get the whole atmosphere of respect. Again, another painting must be done of this, because it's going to be described later on. Their horses were there, all very regally decorated, etc. And then many people came to listen to this discussion, and the mullahs themselves were there, and the Vaishnavas were there. And it's a very beautiful idea for a painting, a beautiful painting. I hope the devotees will be inspired to sometimes produce these paintings. Knowing all, yes, the setting was extraordinary to behold. Yes, this is what I was describing. On one side sat 50 well-dressed Muslim scholars. 50, that's a lot. 50 well-dressed Muslim scholars with white beards, with their majestic, decorated stallions tethered behind them. Beautiful impression. On the other side, 4 Vaishnavas of divine appearance and in a humble mood. See the distinction? One is like full Aishwarya, the other is more inclined to Madhurya. One is very simple, but the other is majestic. So there's a distinction, there's a mood. On the other side, 4 Vaishnavas of divine appearance sat in a humble mood. With great anticipation, many Hindus came and sat behind them. Many others gathered there as well, taking seats nearby. So a huge assembly had come. This is a wonderful opportunity for the Vaishnavas to spread Vaishnava Dharma amongst the conditioned souls. Whether or not the mullah is going to be converted or anything like that is not the question. It's actually an opportunity to speak Vaishnava Dharma. It's the activities of the Vaishnavas. Pandit Gaurachandra was the first to speak. It's described in our notes here by our dear friend Sriman Navadvip Prabhu that the name of the mullah means the rising sun in the material sky. And this is Gaurachandra, means the rising sun in Navadvip, in Goradam. So these 2 moons are going to meet, actually. It's very beautiful. You should read the notes in the 11th canto, written by 11th chapter, Navadvip Prabhu. He was a scholar, and he went into the etymology of all the different names, etc. It's fascinating. Pandit Gaurachandra was the first to speak. He inquired, O great souls, why have you summoned such insignificant people as ourselves? Never for a second are they thinking that they have any importance. They do have the most importance because they're holding the transcendental jewels within their hearts of all creation and transcendence. And the nature of those jewels makes one feel completely humble. Isn't it remarkable? You've got the highest thing, and yet you feel you feel yourself the lowest. And if you've got the lowest thing, you feel the highest. You feel you're puffed up, right? You want to, exhibit your pride everywhere. This is the nature in the material world. One who is humble and meek, like generally the villagers and people like that, they're humble, so they can actually hear the holy name. They know the laws of Dharma, and they can be gifted. And it's described, we were talking on Saturday, that why does Mahaprabhu come to give these immense treasures in this dark Kali Yuga? And it's described that because the people, generally speaking, they know they don't have anything because they're always disturbed. So it's very easy for them to be humble. It's very easy to take a humble mood. So many innocent people and lower class people. That was the question that was asked about the history. Harihara, not Hari, Nyaya Ratna is asking Babaji, why has Mahaprabhu come to give such low class people this highest conception. And he says, because they have the quality of humility. It's only by that quality of humility that you can receive these truths. If you're thinking you're very special, you're empowered, you're a great personality on any level, then you'll restrict it completely, because it's all about the magnificence and beauty and speciality of the spiritual world. It's not about us. We are anuchit, very, very tiny. This is the place we want to appreciate.
We can connect this with the
Huh?
verse in Bhagavad Gita that those who are distressed, I mean, amongst the four of them.
Yes, they
that
come.
yeah.
Those distressed. Yes,
So
very good.
majority of them come from distressed
Yes,
group, I suppose.
yes. Distressed. What is it? And this.
The one who desires wealth, the inquisitive, and the jnani,
Yes,
which are very rare.
very good. You know your Bhagavad Gita. Very nice. Very nice. No, it's good. 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 So yes, these people are all distressed. That person hungry for wealth, etc. Those who are sick and so on, they have some reason to be humble. Therefore, they can understand these higher topics. But those people who are proud of their gyan, the pundits, etc., they can't access this truth. Mullah Badruddin Sahib. So this name, Badruddin Sahib, in the etymology is described about the moon in the world. Humbly replied, Salam, we desire to ask a few questions. Pandit Gaurachandra said, what knowledge might we have that can possibly answer your erudite questions? So proud people like to be flattered because they think they're very important. So if you tell them how important they are, then they'll perhaps listen to you. When you meet someone who's very proud, oh yes, you are very special, this and that, and then they'll listen to what you have to say also. It's a science that the devotees, Vaishnavas, understand how to actually approach people. And if someone is very proud, my Gurudev, you say, you flatter and patter. You flatter them. And then they start to feel, oh yes, he loves me. He recognizes how great I am. And then he might listen to you. But if you try to put him down, he's not going to listen. Badruddin Sahib came a little closer and said, brothers, the Devas and Devis have been worshipped in Hindu society since ancient times. Now we see in our Quran Sharif that Allah is one, not two, and that He has no form. It is an offense to make an image of Him and worship it. I have a doubt about this issue, and I have consulted many Brahman Pandits in the hope of resolving it. Those Pandits replied that Allah is actually formless. However, one cannot possibly conceive of that which has no form. Therefore, one should first make an imaginary form of Allah and meditate upon Him by worshipping that form. However, I am not satisfied with this answer, because creating an imaginary form of Allah is the work of Satan. It is known as But, and it is completely forbidden to worship it. Far from pleasing Allah, such worship only makes one subject to His punishment. You have heard that we have heard that your original preceptor, Sri Chaitanya Dev, corrected all the faults in Hindu Dharma. Yet his Sampradaya also makes provision for worshipping material forms. We want to know why you Vaishnavas have not yet given up the worship of material forms, although you are expert in the decisions of Shastra. So we'll stop there. So that's the question that's going to be unpacked throughout the rest of this chapter, to prove the efficacy, the reality of Thakurji worship. It's very beautiful, and it's a very important question. We need to know, because many people in the world, not just Muslims, Christians also, they will condemn us. Why are you worshipping an idol? They will call it idol worship. So we should know this tattva and shastra.
Unfortunately, many Indians also.
I know, yes, idol. I know. The Indians also, they've tried to follow
that's a language issue.
I know. They call it idols. No, it's not just a language issue. They haven't been educated. So Jaiva Dharma ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Ananta Gauta Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. Now we're coming to our chapter 11, which is really fascinating. the mullah, Badruddin Saib, he's come to politely speak and converse with the Vaishnavas. He knows intuitively that he hasn't appreciated fully the supreme absolute reality. He knows that something is lacking, otherwise he wouldn't have come. So he's come against all social sort of restrictions, because normally a Muslim wouldn't go and inquire from a Vaishnava. But this particular mullah means a religious man. He's considered, and his name, it's described, the etymology of his name, it means the full moon of knowledge. He's in knowledge, the full moon of knowledge, yet he's speaking his questions to the servant of the full moon of Gora. This is the knowledge that is going to be revealed to us. It's coming from the full moon of Gora. So yesterday we described the whole pastime, and they're sitting with their beautiful stallions and their 50 well-dressed Muslims are there in an assembly, and a few Vaishnavas looking very humble in their presence, but many Hindus have actually come in to listen to the conversation. So it's a big assembly now of devotees and Muslims, and they're going to ask these questions. So yesterday we asked the question, we spoke about the question, and he had a doubt about the form of Krishna, because in Islam they're prohibited to worship a form of God. They believe that it will denigate God to a material property, so to speak, or a material, quality. What? Conception, yes, very good, yes. They'll bring him to a material conception. So we also need to know clearly what is the Siddhanta about idolatry, because many people will criticize the devotees. Why are you worshipping the form of Krishna? So this chapter is going to reveal many of these truths, which is very, very helpful for the Vaishnavas to absorb deeply and appreciate. So he's asked this question, and I spoke the question yesterday, and Pandit Gaurachandra is about to answer this question. So I'll read the last part of his question just to refresh us, starting from the middle of page 245. However, I am not satisfied with this answer. That's what I just said. He's not satisfied with this answer. He's been inquiring about this formlessness of the Lord, because creating an imaginary form of Allah is the work of Satan. It is known as Bhut, and it is completely forbidden to worship it. Far from pleasing Allah, such worship only makes one subject to his punishment. Yes, the Muslims are very afraid. It's the god of fear. He puts fear. And they, in turn, also try to put that fear into those who are not Muslims, rather than the quality of love, which is what the Hindu will do, or the Vaishnava certainly will do. This quality of fear is also very tangible in the world, and it's owned by who? By the demons. Fear and control, we've said before many times. We want to know, hang on a sec. Far from punishment. We have heard from your original preceptor, Sri Chaitanya Dev, we have heard that your original preceptor, Sri Chaitanya Dev, corrected all the faults in Hindu Dharma. Yet his Sampradaya also makes provision for worshipping material forms. We want to know why you Vaishnavas have not given up the worship of material forms, although you are expert in the decisions of Shastra. So we know this assembly has come to glorify this beautiful Vishnu Priya's Murti of Sachinandan Mahaprabhu. This is the purpose of this whole occasion, and they're being challenged on it. So the Vaishnava Pandits were inwardly amused at the mullah's question, because it's actually such a basic question. It's not so difficult for a Vaishnava to answer this question. Outwardly they declared, Pandit Gaurachandra Mahashai, kindly give a suitable reply to the mullah's questions. So we just said Gaurachandra means the moon of Gora is going to confront the moon of religion in the form of the mullah. Pandit Gaurachandra said graciously, as you order, and proceeded to answer the question. Gaurachandra said, "He whom you refer to as Allah, we call Bhagavan. The Supreme Lord is one, but he is known by different names in the Quran, the Puranas, and in different countries and languages." Yes, God has different facets that people worship, and they give him a different name. The prime consideration is that the name which expresses all of Supreme Lord's characteristics should be given prominence. So I already explained actually what Bhagavan means, those 6 qualities in full. For this reason, we have greater esteem for the name Bhagavan than the names Allah, which is like Brahm or Paramatma. This Allah originally, because his form is not allowed to be spoken about, therefore this form is considered by the Muslims to be, or Allah is considered to be formless. What is formless? It's the Brahman. Even Paramatma is form. He has a form, but his realization of the Paramatma conception is like an impersonal realization also, because everyone has Paramatma within them. Where's the relationship? Where's the sambandha? The word Allah refers to that being who has no superior, but we do not consider that greatness or supremacy is the highest characteristic of the Lord. It's very interesting. I think because he's a subtle man, he'll respect what's being spoken now. Rather, the characteristic which evokes the highest degree of wonder, chamakarita, and sweetness, madhuri, is worthy of the utmost regard. How beautiful. This astonishment, this chamatkara, or chamatkarita is described here. This Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying continuously, this without this achintya bhav, this mood of wonder, nothing will really transpire. Because what is inhibiting this achintya bhav is pride. If I think I know so much things, how can this sense of wonderment come in the heart of the aspiring sadhak? Just like a child. A child doesn't have pride because he doesn't have any experience, basically. So he's been walking around in a constant state of wonderment because he has no obstruction to pride. But generally, as we grow older, we pick up all these trappings of our apparent expertise in all this, that, and the other, and it restricts our unlimited flow towards the Supreme with astonishment. We've just described the same in the Falshruti, this ivitrata. You deny the ivitrata. You
diminishes innocence.
Huh?
Diminishes innocence.
Definitely. And we should aspire for that innocent. We call it in the Vaishnava terminology simplicity. A simple devotee is considered a very good quality for a devotee. That simplicity of thought, of heart. Absolute shraddha that we can understand Krishna can pick up a mountain with his little finger. We don't have any problem with that. Remember the story of the cobbler, when the cobbler was asking Narad, who was on his way to Vaikuntha, "Oh, please tell me what Lord Narayan is doing." And then Narad went a bit further, and the Brahmin said, "Oh, you're going to Vaikuntha? Tell me what Brahman's doing, what Lord Narayan's doing." Remember the story? And then he came back, and he told the cobbler, "Oh, Lord Narayan, he's threading a camel through the eye of a needle." And that cobbler just jumped for joy, was so completely in ecstasy. Yes, could completely. Then he went and told the same thing to the Brahmana. The Brahmana said, "Oh, you didn't even go to Vaikuntha. How can I believe that Narayan is putting a camel through the eye of a needle?" So he had this achintya bhav. Why? Because the Brahman was very proud of his Brahminical caste, etc., etc., etc. It's a very good analogy, story to appreciate this. Something that is exceedingly great inspires one type of wonder, but minuteness is a counterpart to greatness, and it inspires another type of wonder. I bet he'd never thought of that before, the mullah. Hence the name Allah does not express the highest limit of wonder, because it expresses greatness, but not minuteness. On the other hand, the word Bhagavan implies every type of wonder imaginable. So first of all, he's trying to show the nature of the worship of the Hindu god, Bhagavan, and its etymology, etc. What does it mean? Against the limited name of Allah. which only means greatness. So we should appreciate these points. Because perhaps you might meet some Muslims. And recently, by Krishna's divine arrangement, I've met so many really, really nice Muslims. They follow very carefully their creed and code. Actually, here, where I live in this Golden Dweep, all of the workmen here, they're all Muslims. And none of them drink and none of them smoke. And as soon as you want to call a Hindu tradesman, they'll probably come smelling of whiskey or something. Most of them are alcoholics. It's quite tragic. It's just unique that I'm experiencing this because they become frustrated with life, etc. So India has a big problem in this area of alcoholism and so on. But the Muslims are very strict.
At the airport, the only thing to sell there was whiskey.
Yes, right. There you go. But the Muslims, they are very strict about their regulated principles. Even though they have other defects, of course, the principal defect is the way they kill the cows. We can't even begin to go there. That's abominable. But nevertheless, the characters, because this devotional service is, if Mahaprabhu is going to touch you with some of his potency, all people should be captured by Mahaprabhu's mercy. And if some connection can be made, like giving them prasadam, etc., I have a local little cleaning man comes, and I've given him buckets of prasadam. And he chants Hare Krishna every time he sees me now. He says, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. So who knows what his future destiny is just because of that sukriti he's incurring by being here. So the devotee is always looking for an opportunity to share Mahaprabhu's gifts. Hence the name Allah does not express the highest. Oh, I said that. The first characteristic of Bhagavan is complete Aishwarya, opulence, which refers to the ultimate limit of greatness and minuteness. The second characteristic is that he is the most powerful because he possesses all Shaktis, Sarva Shakti Mata. That which is beyond the reach of human intellect is governed by Ishwara's Achintya Shakti, inconceivable potency, beyond the conditioned jiva's intellect, by which he simultaneously possesses form and is formless. Now he's really blowing him out. He's not only giving the idea that minuteness is a great quality, but he's saying that form as well as formlessness is, everything is included within Bhagavan. There's no restriction. So he's trying to dismantle his conception of this absolute not having these extra qualities of minuteness and of this achintya shakti, this wonder. By accepting that he not only doesn't have a form, but he has a form also. If one thinks that Ishvara cannot have a form, one rejects his achintya shakti, by which Bhagavan manifests his external form and pastimes before his bhaktas. How else is Krishna going to touch the hearts of the bhaktas in this world without Thakurji? He will explain. Allah, Brahm, or Paramatma are nirvikar, formless. So they do not have any special, wonderful characteristics. Antaryami within the heart is only a witness. He's never ever going to interfere with the independence of the jiva under any circumstances. He doesn't have that capacity. He's simply witnessing the activities of the jiva. Antaryami. The third characteristic of Bhagavan is that he is always Mangalamayi, auspicious, and Yashapurna, all famous. Therefore, his pastimes are full of nectar. His fourth characteristic is that he possesses all beauty, Saundarya, and all living beings who are endowed with transcendental vision see him as the most beautiful person. This quality of beauty, Krishna means all attractive. If Krishna manifests by some divine mercy in front of us, the first thing that will melt all of our hearts is his astonishing beauty. That's more captivating than anything else. It's his beauty that will captivate the heart. We think about beauty in this world, and we sing the beautiful form of a man or the beautiful form of a woman, etc., or something of beauty. And it has the effect of uplifting us when we start to think about beauty in the beautiful forest, the beautiful flower, beautiful river, beautiful ocean. So many examples to cast the eye on the beautiful aspect of Krishna's, and it enlivens the heart. It gladdens the heart immediately. We feel softened by that attraction to the. What to speak of Krishna? He softens the heart of all living entities. Bhagavan's fifth characteristic is that he has limitless knowledge, ashesha gyan. This means he is pure, complete, omniscient, and transcendental to mundane matter. That's magnificent to consider. Nothing to do with mundane matter. His form is the very embodiment of consciousness and is beyond all material elements, bhuta. His sixth characteristic is that even though he is the master and controller of all jivas, he is unattached, nirlep, and independent, swatantra. These are Bhagavan's 6 primary qualities. So remember where this is. If you have a notebook and you're taking notes, remember in this chapter 11, this last paragraph we've read is a very concise description of Krishna's qualities, so beautifully presented. If we're speaking to an impersonalist or a Muslim, etc., like this, and we can remember the gist of these 6 qualities and how to present them in such a way, then you can start to dismantle this impersonal conception, right? By knowing this. Bhagavan has 2 manifestations, his feature of Aishwarya, majesty, and his feature of Madhurya, sweetness. His Madhurya manifestation is the supreme friend of the jivas, and it is that personality known as Krishna or Chaitanya who is the Lord of our hearts. You have said that worshipping some imaginary form of the Lord is worship of material forms, Bhut Parast, Arabic, or Bhut Puja, Sanskrit. And we also agree with that. The Dharma of the Vaishnavas is to worship the fully conscious, eternal deity form of Bhagavan. Therefore, idolatry, Bhut Parast, is not part of the Vaishnava doctrine. Very important to appreciate. Now he's going to explain the nature of the deity form. One should clearly understand that the Vaishnava's worship of the deity is not idolatry. One cannot prohibit deity worship simply because some books forbid idolatry. Everything depends on the quality of faith in the worshipper's heart. The more one's heart can transcend the influence of matter, the more competent one will be to worship the pure form of the deity. As long as we're considering the deity is made of stone or wood or straw or mud, then the deity is not going to manifest its full potency. But when the sadhak has complete shraddha, complete faith in the omniscience of the deity, he's seeing it that way, he's accepting it that way, he's praying in the core of his heart to that Thakurji, then this achintya bhav will flourish in relationship to that deity. Just like we remember the beautiful deity of Tota Gopinath, when Mahaprabhu himself manifested that extraordinary form of Tota Gopinath along with Radha and Lalita Sakhi. This form was so... even today we see that same form that Mahaprabhu manifested 500 years ago. I think even someone with a heart of stone or a brain of wood coming in front of Tota Gopinath would be moved by his exquisite beauty. And if they're submissive enough, humble enough to accept this is a form of the Lord that was actually manifested by the Lord's own hand, then the speciality of that deity will be revealed to him. The more one's heart can transcend the influence of matter, the more competent one will be to worship the pure form of the deity. You are the Mullah Sahib, the chief of Muslim scholars, and your heart may be free from the influence of matter. But what about those of your disciples who are not so learned? Are their hearts free from all thoughts of matter? The more one is absorbed in thoughts of matter, the more he will be implicated in the worship of matter. Beautiful. Understand where he's going. If you're thinking materially, then that's who you're going to be worshipping. Although he may claim that the Lord is formless, his heart is still filled with thoughts of matter. It is very difficult for the general mass of people to worship the pure form of the deity, for such worship is strictly a matter of personal qualification. In other words, only one who has been elevated beyond the influence of matter can transcend thoughts of material form. I sincerely request you to consider this subject carefully. You understand that last part? I read it again. In other words, only one who has been elevated beyond the influence of matter, who chants Hare Krishna, for example, can transcend thoughts of material form. We can appreciate this achintya. I sincerely request you to consider this subject carefully. He's been very, very merciful to this mullah sahib. Mullah, I have considered your statement carefully. You say that Bhagavan refers to 6 astonishing attributes of the Supreme, and I have concluded that the Quran Sharif describes the same 6 qualities in relationship to the word Allah. There is no point arguing over the meaning of the word Allah. Allah is Bhagavan. So that's very wonderful. 10 points up for Gaurachandra straight away. Gaurachand, very good. If that is so, you must accept the beauty and opulence of the Supreme Being. It is then admitted that he possesses a splendid form in the spiritual world, which is distinct from the world of mundane matter. This is our divine deity form. Mullah, in our Quran, it is written that the Supreme Entity has a divine, all-conscious form. So we are compelled to accept this fact. All right? They've already got it written in their scripture that he has a divine form. However, any image of that spiritual form is material. They can't put the two together because they're not sufficiently purified to actually connect, because they kill cows in such a horrendous way. They're banned from going in there. However, any image of that spiritual form is material. That is what we call Bhut. The worship of Bhut is not the worship of the Supreme Being. Please tell me your viewpoint on this. You understand the question? Gaurachand, in the Vaishnava Shastras, there is a provision for worshipping the divine spiritual deity form of Bhagavan. For the elevated class of devotees, no prescription has been given to worship material objects composed of earth, water, fire, or other elements. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:84-13, Yasyatma buddhi knape tri datuke, swadi kala ritushu bome ijya di, yat tirtha buddhi, salile na karishcha, janeshva abhijaneshu saeva gokara. One who considers this corpse-like body composed of the 3 elements, Sata, Pitta, and Kapha, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, to be his real self, who regards his wife, children, and others to be his very own, who considers mundane forms made of earth, stone, or wood to be worshipable, and who regards mere water to be a place of pilgrimage, but who does not consider the Bhagavat Bhaktas to be more dear than his very self, to be his very own, to be worshipable, and to be places of pilgrimage. So 4 qualifications here: to be his very self, to be his very own, to be worshipable, and to be places of pilgrimage. Such a person, though human, is no better than an ass among animals. So he's condemning the worship of matter, and we should worship the elevated bhaktas with all our hearts, because they will contain the direction to the supreme spiritual reality. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita 9.25, Bhutani yatanti bhutejya. Those who worship matter go to the realms of matter. We see from these and many other conclusive statements that there is no basis in Shastra for the worship of dead matter. He wants to understand, wants the mullah to get on the same page here. The Vaishnavas are not worshipping dead matter. Then he'll go to elaborate. There is an important point to consider in this. Human beings have different degrees of qualification according to their knowledge and sanskar. Only those who can understand pure spiritual existence are competent to worship the pure spiritual form of the deity. One's understanding is proportionate to one's development in this regard. Yes, our adhikar, according to our adhikar. If you bring a gross materialist in front of the deity, he's not going to see the deity because his adhikar is practically zero. But if you bring a Vaishnava in front of the deity, they'll weep in great happiness and joy. Those whose spiritual qualification is extremely low cannot understand the pure spiritual state of existence. Even when such people meditate on the Lord within their minds, the form that they imagine is material, and meditating on a material form within the mind is the same as constructing a form of physical elements and regarding it as the Lord's form. Yes, nothing material here. That is why it is beneficial for a person on this level of eligibility to worship the deity. Factually speaking, it would be most inauspicious for the general class of people if there were no worship of deities. When ordinary jivas become inclined towards the service of the Lord, they become despondent. They cannot see the deity form of the Lord before them. In religions where there is no worship of the deity, members who are on a low level of spiritual qualification are highly materialistic and oblivious to Ishvara, or in a state of distraction. Therefore, worship of the deity is the foundation of religion for all humanity. So understand these points, that the deity form is going to remind any pious soul of the presence of the Lord. It's going to inspire them immediately, instantly. This is why here in Bharatvash there are Thakurjis everywhere. Everywhere you go in the big cities and so on, there are so many mandirs and so many different forms of the Lord that people get so inspired by to fulfill their daily obligations, etc., to go through their lives just by worshipping that particular Thakurji. So they become the focus point. And then it's very important for our faith, because faith, Shraddha, is the very first quality on this path to Prem. Our faith has to be cultivated. And if daily we're able to have this opportunity to see the deity, then our faith can be very progressive. And he's saying here that if you are if you don't have that opportunity, it's saying in religions where there is no worship of the deity, members are on a low level of spiritual qualification and are highly materialistic and oblivious to Ishvara. You can think of many places in the Western countries. They're not worshipping deities. They're just walking around and they're worshipping money, or they're worshipping sex life, or they're worshipping, what else are they worshipping? Come on, you've just come from England today. Huh? What? Google. Football. Football. Okay, football. Yes, they worship football. Okay. Huh?
Politicians.
Sorry?
Politicians. They worship politicians.
Kali Krishna?
Politician.
Politicians, yes, sorry, I'm not hearing someone. Politicians, yes. These are the idols. These are their Thakurjis. They're putting faith in them. Even though their faith has been broken all the way along the line, still they have nothing else to put their faith in. How tragic. How absolutely heartbreakingly tragic for those people who don't have any pure object to put their faith in. It's tragic. Whereas in contrast, you see here in Bharadvash, many people will visit the temple daily and get like a shot in the arm, so to speak, rejuvenation of their spiritual motivation. Every day they will go, and they're making this connection with a particular deity. It's very wonderful. The form of Parameshwara is revealed to the Mahajans through their trance of unalloyed Gyan Yoga, and they meditate on that pure transcendental form in their hearts. Now he's going to give where the deity comes from, which are purified by bhakti. These are the Mahabhagavats, the Mahajans. When the bhakta's heart is revealed to the world after his continuous meditation, the image of the Lord's transcendental form is fashioned in this mundane world. So first of all, it's revealed in the form of the transcendental heart of the practitioner, and then he will manifest it himself in this world. The divine form of the Lord, having been reflected in this way by the Mahajans, has become the form of the deity. It's reflected out of the heart of the pure sadhaks, the Mahajans, the pure devotee. This form is being reflected out. We look at so many of these deities. Aren't they utterly astonishing? Sometimes you see the features of Radhika or you see the features of Krishna and they look otherworldly. It looks almost inconceivable how they could have manifested such a sublime form and countenance of so many of these Thakurjis. It's astonishing. We see across the river Radha Madhav, such large, imposing forms, and their beautiful expressions melt the hearts of thousands of people regularly. This is wonderful. This is very wonderful. The deity form is always Chinmaya, spiritual and conscious, for those who are on the highest platform of eligibility. Yes, if we're on that platform, we'll see non-different. And then we'll start to, in our hearts, communicate with that deity. How can I serve that deity? Naturally, that will come. Those on the intermediate level see the deity as endowed with perception and awareness, manomaya. This means that the intermediate devotee has faith that the deity is conscious of his thoughts and prayers. Right? When we're in front of the deity, we're opening ourselves to the deity and we're appreciating the deity understands my heart. That's what it means here. And accepts his mood of worship. However, the intermediate devotee, unlike the advanced devotee, does not directly perceive the deity as the spiritual all-conscious form of Bhagavan, because his knowledge is limited. He hasn't matured his transcendental knowledge of who is Bhagavan yet. That hasn't matured by Bhagavan's mercy. That knowledge hasn't manifested yet. So he's still remaining on the intermediate platform. Understand? Understand that? No one's saying anything. Do you understand it? Okay. Unlike the advanced devotee who does not directly perceive the deity as the spiritual all-conscious form of Bhagavan, those on the lowest level initially see the deity as material, Jadamaya, but in time the deity reveals his pure spiritual form to the intelligence purified by spiritual love. It's coming by mercy, by the mercy of Thakurji. That lower intelligent person will come to appreciate the beauty and speciality of that deity. In his heart, Krishna will inspire the intelligence to perceive. Reveals his pure spiritual form to the intelligence purified by spiritual love. Consequently, the deity form of Bhagavan is suitable to be worshipped and served by all classes of devotees, whether a low class or medium class or advanced class. In the low class, then they will be inspired by Krishna to eventually come to that intermediate vision. And the intermediate devotee will eventually come to the advanced stage. It is unnecessary to worship an imaginary form, but it is highly beneficial to worship Bhagavan's eternal deity form. It's covering a lot of ground here. These are all very powerful sentences. Each sentence by sentence has its own weight here. The Vaishnava Sampradayas give this provision for people of these three levels of eligibility to worship the deity. There is no fault in this, for it is the only arrangement by which the jivas can gradually attain auspiciousness. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:14-26. Yata yatatma parimarijayate so mat punyagata shravana bidananaha tata pashyati vastu sukshman chakshush yataivanjuna samprayuktam. I'm not very good for the verses, but anyway, you can read it yourself. My Brahmin friend isn't present at the moment, who usually recites, so. O Uddhav, as the eyes that are treated with therapeutic ointment can see very minute objects, similarly, when the heart is cleansed of material contamination by hearing and reciting the narrations of my supremely pure activities, he can see my subtle, transcendental form, which is beyond the purview of matter. So this is going to be in the stage of the advanced person viewing the Lord. His intelligence will have become so purified, his subtle intelligence will have become pure by the mercy of the Lord. The Jivatma is covered by the material mind, and in this state he cannot know himself or render service to Paramatma. However, by performing sadhana bhakti, which consists of hearing, chanting, and other devotional practices, the Atma gradually develops spiritual power. As that power increases, material bondage slackens, and the more material bondage is relaxed, the more the soul's own natural function comes into ascendancy. Thus, one gradually attains direct perception of the self and Ishvara and engages directly in spiritual activities. I want to stop here, but I want to reiterate that last paragraph tomorrow, just to read it again. I mean, it's so profound what he's saying. There are so many things here, but I don't want to start to rush through these next paragraphs and sentences, so we'll stop on our hourly basis so that you'll be refreshed and enthusiastic for tomorrow. So, Jaiva Dharma Ki Jai. Do you follow all the teachings? So beautiful, so powerful. He's sitting in front of a Muslim who's sensitive, who's understands the precepts of Mahaprabhu. He's connected with the Chandkazi, in fact, this group of Muslims. So they've had that mercy. That's why they're eligible to come and even question the Vaishnavas. But these truths are so beautiful that Gaurachand is unpacking in front of him, showing the reality of the deity, how it's manifesting from the heart of that Mahajan, that pure devotee. So very profound, beautiful teachings. This is an amazing chapter. I'm really feeling inspired by it. Jaiva Dharma Ki Jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai, Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi. So now coming back to our subject matter of chapter 11, and from page 250, I just want to recap a little bit just to put us in sync with what we've done previously. So, because we had a day when we were discussing so many appearance and disappearance days yesterday. So I'm going to start in the middle of 250. So now we know the setting. The mullah has arrived. He's questioning the Vaishnavas. Gaura Chandra is the spokesman, and the mullah, his name means this Baradur Din. His name, can't remember just now, is means the full moon of religion. So he's a special person, no doubt, and he's come Just to come in front of the Vaishnavas, you have to be a special person and to question them nicely. So he's asking about deity worship. This is the topic of this chapter. So now in the middle of this page 250, Gaurachand is saying, which means the full moon of Mahaprabhu, the servant of the full moon of Mahaprabhu. The deity form is always Chinmaya, spiritual and conscious, for those who are on the highest platform of eligibility. Those on the intermediate level see the deity as endowed with perception and awareness, manomaya. So this is the intermediate. This means that the intermediate devotee has faith that the deity is conscious of his thoughts and prayers. Yes, he's giving his heart to the Thakurji and accepts his mood of worship. Thakurji is accepting my mood of worship. However, the intermediate devotee, unlike the advanced devotee, does not directly perceive the deity as the spiritual conscious form of Bhagavan, because he hasn't realized, he hasn't got sufficient faith in the actual form of Bhagavan. It's still in process of maturing. Those on the lowest level initially see the deity as material, Jadamaya. But in time, the deity reveals his pure spiritual form to the intelligence purified by spiritual love. Yes, it's a process. Consequently, the deity form of Bhagavan is suitable to be worshipped and served by all classes of devotees. Yes, he's describing the three different types of devotees, and the deity form is going to help cement all three types of devotees with their highest aspiration of connecting with Bhagavan. Consequently, the deity form of Bhagavan is suitable to be worshipped and served by all classes of devotees. It is unnecessary to worship an imaginary form, but it is highly beneficial to worship Bhagavan's eternal deity form. So he's broken this down already and described what is imaginary. That's to be rejected. The Vaishnava Sampradayas give this provision for people of these three levels of eligibility to worship the deity. There is no fault in this, for it is the only arrangement by which the jivas can gradually attain auspiciousness. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:14-26. Yatha atma pari mrijayate so mat punya gata shravana bida nai tata pashyati astu shukshman chakshu yataiva injuna samprayuktam. O Uddhav, as the eyes that are treated with therapeutic ointment can see very minute objects, similarly, when the heart is cleansed of material contamination by hearing and reciting the narrations of my supremely pure activities, he can see my subtle transcendental form, which is beyond the purview of matter. Yes, once we stop indulging with so much energy within the material realm to try and satisfy my material body, and we start cultivating more and more this focus and attention to my transcendental body in relationship to his service to Krishna, because the Jnani path, the path of moksha, is simply just to connect with Paramatma without service or sambandha. And that's like a glorified, liberated condition. But when the devotee is hearing constantly how he can render service to that Supreme Lord or that Supreme Dham, Vrindavan Dham, Gora Dham, then the activity of his soul becomes awakened. When we do our offering, for example, offering the bhoga, and we're doing it with full concentration and heart, that we're offering this to Sri Radha and Krishna through the medium of Guru. And when that has been offered as prasadam, then we very carefully offer that prasadam to Guru and all our Guru Vargya and all the different personalities that we choose to offer to, that Mahaprasad. And if we do that with really focused attention, that is directly devotional seva. And that will increase day by day by day. Sometimes 2-3 times a day we're doing that offering. For many, many years we're doing that. So each time we're doing it, it's fresh. It's not like it was last time a few hours ago. Again, we're bringing up our highest devotional sentiments to offer to Krishna. This shows the continuum. It shows um, the progress of our consciousness. We can see each day, am I becoming more focused, more loving towards the Lord? It has to be progressive. Otherwise, it's like the analogy of cycling up a hill. To cycle up a hill, you have to get a lot of steam up, right? To cycle up the hill. But if you stop cycling, what happens? Immediately you start to roll back down again. You can't maintain that place. We have to keep the pressure up, so to speak, to keep the focus of our bhajan, of our attention on these merciful personalities, to maintain that standard. The Jivatma is covered by the material mind. Yes, I just said that the Jivatma has given the power of attorney. You know what the power of attorney means? Like when you go to a lawyer and you give the lawyer
Act on my behalf.
totally on my behalf. You can have the keys to all my secrets, my documents, and everything, completely on my behalf. So the soul has given the mind that power. The Jivatma is covered by the material mind, and in that state, he cannot know himself or render service to Paramatma. Yes, as the material mind, he can't remember Paramatma. However, by performing sadhana bhakti, which consists of hearing, chanting, and other devotional practices, the Atma gradually develops spiritual power. Yes, as we start to turn towards the transcendental self, then that potency in our material lives will increase. Everything will become auspicious. Klesh Agni Shubhada. Klesh Agni, Klesh means suffering. Agni means incinerated. Agni, fire. Shubhada, this is the first stage of sadhana bhakti, describes Kleshagni Shubhada. Moksha Laghuta Krit Sadurlabha. That's the second stage, becoming freed from the desire for moksha. And then the third stage is Sandra Ananda, Visheshatma, Sri Krishna Akashani Chasa. That's the third stage. That's the Prem stage. So these three stages, sadhana bhakti, bhav bhakti, and prema bhakti. It's a process. It's a wonderful process. We need to get on the horse. As the power increases, material knowledge slackens. Got that?
Bondage.
What?
Bondage.
You said knowledge.
The Atma gradually develops spiritual power. As the power increases, material bondage, yes, my bondage to matter in the form of my desires. Actually, it's easy to prove this to ourselves. If you sit down in the morning to chant and say you're planning to chant for 2 or 3 hours, you might write down what is your program for the day. I used to do this. I had like 6 or 7 things that I wanted to cover that day, you know, go and attend to. By the time I'd finished my chanting, I could look at that list again and say, well, I've actually only got to do about 2 or 3 of those things. The other things just became superfluous. So you can see that, see if it works for you. Just eliminating all the little details that we thought that we had to attend to. Perhaps they're not so important if they're not connected with developing the transcendental connection. You know what I mean? It's helpful, just a little game. As the power increases, material bondage slackens, and the more material bondage is relaxed, the more the soul's own natural function comes into ascendancy. Yes, if we sit down and we start connecting with our mala nicely, then all these material desires, they actually start to drift away. That's why if you chant more, you always have time to chant more because you have less material desires and less material things to attend to. But if you think you're a very important person and you have very important things, because that's the effect of what the material world will make you feel. They'll flatter you and patter you and say, yes, you're so important. You have so many important things to do. You're a big man in the world, or a big woman in the world. You have so many, everyone's expecting so much from you. And if you respond to that with the material false ego, then you give up that opportunity of a more reflective internal focus. Understand? And these material desires just dwindle and dwindle. Because the nature of the mind, it always says, I want, I want, I want, I want. That's the nature of the material mind. But what's the nature of the soul? The soul doesn't want anything from this material world. There's nothing in this material world that will satisfy the soul at all. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So it doesn't want anything. That's the contrast. That's where we have to juggle in between somehow. Thus, one gradually attains direct perception of the self and Ishvara and engages directly in spiritual activities. So he's talking to the mullah in connection with the deity, and he's describing to the mullah that this connection with the deity can liberate us from all of these material desires. It has that potency. Some people think that one should endeavor to realize the absolute truth by rejecting all that is not truth. This is a very important point. This is known as the cultivation of dry knowledge. Huh? Yes, neti neti. What power does a conditioned soul have to renounce objects that are not inherently real? It's like the analogy of someone, a bank teller in a bank, and he suddenly says, I renounce all the money in this bank. Everyone just laugh. It's not yours to renounce anyway. What are you saying? You renounce all the money in this bank. So nothing in this world is ours. And if we're focusing on renunciation of what? This will just lead us into moksha, a mood for moksha. Dry knowledge. Be careful. What power does a conditioned soul have to renounce objects that are not inherently real? Can a prisoner who is confined to a cell liberate himself simply by desiring to do so? His objective should be to eradicate the offense that has placed him in bondage. The Jivatma's principal defect is that he has forgotten that he is an eternal servant of Bhagavan, and that is why he is bound by Maya and forced to suffer material happiness, distress, and repeated birth and death in this world. Remember the story of the man running in the forest and he falls into a dry well and he grabs hold of two branches and he looks down into the bottom of the well and he sees it's filled with scorpions and snakes, poisonous snakes. And then he looks above and he's running away from a tiger. He sees the mouth of the tiger above, but he's holding on to these two branches. And there's a rat, two rats, one's a black rat, one's a white rat. They start to nibble at these branches that he's holding on. So his future doesn't look very good. It's going to be suffering. But when he's fallen into this well, he's somehow shaken the tree where these roots are. And in the tree was a beehive. And the beehive is dripping honey. And it's dripping right past his tongue. And he sticks his tongue out and he catches that honey and he thinks, so sweet. But this is like the happiness that we experience in this world. We're surrounded by birth, death, disease, and old age, right? All these things are happening to us. And we're walking away from transcendence in so many different ways. And yet we're tasting a moment of material pleasure and we think, oh, that's wonderful. Now life is worth living. I had a wonderful experience. Life is worth living now. I just got a taste of the honey. Let me keep staying in this, predicament. This pastime of the tiger is in the Prahlad Charita, in the commentary, in the 7th canto, Bhagavatam. Although a person may initially be very busy in sense gratification, this is what we were just talking about, if for some reason or another his mind becomes a little inclined towards Ishvara, and he regularly takes darshan of the deity and hears Lila Katha, his original nature of being the eternal servant of Krishna will be strengthened gradually, gradually. The more strength this inherent nature develops, the more competent he becomes to perceive spirit directly. The only hope of spiritual progress for those who are the least spiritually qualified is to serve the deity and to hear and chant about the Lord. This is why the Mahajans have established service to the deity.
So that's why I said that the deity worship is for the neophytes.
But nevertheless, we are all neophytes to begin with. So that connection with the deity in the neophyte stage we've already discussed, they just see it like stone, but still they're practicing that mood of worship. If they're not worshipping the deity, it's like in Australia, the Aboriginals, they worship mountains and trees. You know, many people can worship different objects, but if you're worshipping a form of takoji and you're hearing the Lila Kata, it's saying, if you're hearing that those pastimes about that form that you're worshipping, gradually, that form will start to manifest in your heart as a reality. The identity of Krishna will start to manifest. But it starts at the neophyte stage, yes. And then it goes to the intermediate stage and then the advanced stage we discussed. The advanced devotee sees the deity as non-different completely to Krishna. But the intermediate devotee is still in process of unraveling his various anartas to appreciate the absolute reality of Thakurji. It all takes time. We can't fast forward it. We can become more enthusiastic, though, to increase it. Mula, isn't meditating on a form of the Lord within one's mind superior to imagining a form with the help of the material elements? Good question. Understand the question. Is it better that we just create some material image, or is it better just to meditate on our imagination of the Lord? What's better? He's going to answer. Good question. Gaurachandra, they are one and the same. So what we are imagining in our mind, and if we're using the material elements to put something together to worship the Lord, and we're imagining that's the Lord, if we've made an effigy, for example, and we're imagining that is the Lord, then Gaurachandra is saying they're both the same. It's honor, it's worshipping. And this mood of worship, something beyond the self. And if we know about divine nature, that is what we're focusing on, right? It's like even the Aboriginals, for example, in worshipping mountains, is a step up from the regular beef eaters who are not worshipping anything. At least they're honoring something in nature. And from that stage, it can develop in another birth to a higher stage. But at least they have the mood of worship and honor towards something achintya beyond them. Understand? Gaurachandra, they are one and the same. The mind follows matter, and whatever it thinks of is also material. We may say that Brahm is all-pervading, but how can our minds actually conceive of this, right? If you're trying to worship the Brahm, how can you conceive of that? We will be forced to think of it in terms of the all-pervasiveness of the sky. How can the mind go beyond this consideration? How can we stretch it to that? Our conception of Brahm is therefore constrained by the limitation of material space. In other words, we're only imagining the Brahm. We're just imagining that effulgent light. It's all the imagination. It's not, because he's talking about worshipping something that is formless. And Gaurachandra is answering, well, if you're worshipping something formless, it means it's beyond time and space, but your mind can't reach that place of consideration of something beyond the mind. Understand? It can't connect with something beyond your mind. Therefore, we have the deity, which is not beyond the mind, it's right in front of us. So there's a form, but you can't really imagine the Brahmajyoti, because basically Islam is focusing on the Brahmajyoti. They're not actually focusing on any personal form of the Lord. That's not their philosophy. Understand? We'll get it slowly. If one says, I am meditating on Brahm, the experience of Brahm will be limited by material time, for it fades when one's meditation is concluded. As soon as you come out of that meditation, you start to interact with the gross material elements, and again you forget about that experience of them. You might remember it to some degree, but you forget the vision of it. How can the mind's meditation grasp an object that is above matter? The mind is made of matter. It can only operate as far as the limitations of matter. It can't go beyond that. If it tries to go into the imagination, then it's called imagination. It's not necessarily factual. It's just imagination. But if we follow the Shastra and honor the deity and understanding, this is a stepping stone to understand the form of the Lord. The form of the Lord is very important. It makes the whole philosophy personal. Without having the personal identity of Krishna, then we have the contrast, impersonal, which means going to the Brahmajyoti, which is the Brahm, which is what he's explaining about. You're catching it. Understand? It's a very beautiful explanation here. How can the mind's meditation grasp an object that is above matter when it is conditioned by time and space? Yes, the mind is conditioned by material time, past, present, and future, which are material phenomena. One may reject the idea that the form of the deity can consist of material elements such as earth and water, and one can imagine that Ishvara is situated in the directions or space, but still this is all Bhuta Puja, the worship of matter. It's still an imagination of the material mind. You haven't connected with the transcendental ingredient yet. It's still stuck in that time and space. When we say material time and space, past, present, and future, in the transcendental realm across the Viraja River, there's no time. There's only the powerful present. That's all that exists. And how can the mind, we can't, when we try to appreciate Jiva Tattva, we can't really fully ever understand it because we've never experienced anything that is eternal. We've never had direct experience of something that is eternal. Correct? We've never experienced that. We've only experienced matter, material practices, etc. When we contemplate the Leela and the pastimes of Krishna, then we start to appreciate that place of eternality. But we've never actually experienced that place until this body, that Vastu Siddhi that we said at the beginning, this body, we leave this body completely. No material object can support one's attainment of the transcendental goal. Beautiful sentence. No material object can support one's attainment of the transcendental goal. He's just agreeing with the mullah that if you create a material object which hasn't been empowered by someone with transcendental vision, that will never help you to reach the goal. The material object will not help us reach the goal in any circumstances. The only thing that facilitates this is the awakening of the inclination towards Ishvara. Unless we genuinely want to serve Krishna, only then is that fictitious material goal going to become purified. If I want to connect with Krishna, then by worshipping the deity will begin to accept, like I just described about offering the bhoga. You can't see Krishna while you're offering your bhoga, but with full shraddha and faith, you're offering your bhoga. And if Thakurji is there, you're offering directly to him.
And what's greed?
Huh?
It's greed that's necessary. Greed.
Hunger. Yes, hunger for this to become a reality. Absolutely. Utsaha. Great enthusiasm. Utsaha nischayat daryat. Rupa Goswami mentions second verse of the Upadeshamrita, or third verse. This inclination is inherent within the Jivatma. That's important to appreciate. This inclination, it's inherent within the Jivatma. It's already there. What's that? Uh, Nitya-siddha Krishna Prem. What's it? Nitya-siddha Krishna Prem. Sabu Shastra Nai. Shravanadi Sudha Chitta Korya Udai. Nitya-siddha Krishna Prem. Sadhya. Sadhya Kabunai. That this Nitya Prem, Nitya Siddha, the eternal perfect Prem, Nitya Siddha, Krishna Prem, Sadhya Kabunai, is eternally present in the heart of the Jiva. Shravanadi, that means by hearing about this, Shravanadi, Shuddha Chitta, that the purity of the Chitta becomes purified. And then one can remember. Where are we? This inclination is inherent within the Jivatma and is gradually strengthened and converted into bhakti when one utters the name of God, recites his pastimes, and receives inspiration from beholding the deity, Sri Vigraha. The Lord's spiritual form can be experienced only by pure bhakti, not by gyan and karma. So Rupa Goswami also says in that Kriti Sadhya Bhavet Sadhya Bhav Sasadanabhida Nitya Siddhyasya Prakritam. In potential, this Nitya Siddha is there. It's there already. We're just trying to waken it up again. We're not trying to get anything new. It's already there. We're just trying to uncover our origin, our original nature. The Lord's spiritual form can be experienced only by pure bhakti, not by gyan and karma. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is being at length through this yoga ladder, starting with karma, then going to gyan. Then the fruit of gyan is moksha, but beyond liberation is bhakti. Mula. Matter is distinct from God. Great. I think that it is better not to worship material objects, because it is said that Satan introduced the worship of matter to keep the living entities bound in the material world. So he gives this evil propensity to exploit the earth for our own benefit a name, and he calls it Satan. We call it Kali. Kali Maharaj and Satan are in sync. They're best buddies. Gaurachand. Ishvara is one without a second, and he has no rival. Everything in this world is created by him and is under his control. Therefore, he can be satisfied with any object that is used in his worship. That's a big statement. Any object that is used in his worship, he'll be satisfied with that. We're using these electronics to glorify Krishna, broadcast Krishna. These are material objects, but we're using them for a spiritual purpose so Krishna can accept them, right? And make it successful. Everything is created by him and is under his control. Therefore, he can be satisfied with any object that is used in his service. There is no object in this world one can worship that can arouse his malice, for he is all auspicious. Even if a person such as Satan exists, he is no more than a special jiva under the control of God, and has no power to do anything that is opposed to God's will. However, in my opinion, it is not possible for such a monstrous living entity to exist. No activity can take place that is contrary to the will of Ishvara, nor is any living entity independent of the Lord. So Kali Maharaj is a personality representing this age of degradation, and he's representing it by people becoming encouraged to the lower grade degraded activities, particularly wealth, gold, etc., prostitution, intoxication. So this personality is representing that degradation. But that personality or that degradation is all manifesting by Krishna's will. I mean, in every single cycle, the Chatuyugi, there's always a Kali Yuga. There's 1,000 Kali Yugas in the day of Lord Brahma. It's like the seasons. The seasons they come, and some seasons are pleasant and some seasons are not pleasant. But this is all ordained by Krishna for our advancement. And we described the other day very beautifully. I can send you a document now because we've already typed it up about the extraordinary nature of such a yuga and how it's so beautiful, except the attainment is minimal compared to what the attainment is in Kali Yuga. As the ages come down, the attainments go up, which is remarkable to appreciate. So in Kali Yuga, especially this darkest of Kali Yuga, Danya Kali Yuga, there's the highest attainment ever known in the ages of man. In this Kali Yuga, I'll send the document after. It's from the 11th canto. One may ask, what is the origin of sin? My answer is as follows. Vidya, knowledge, is the understanding that the jivas are servants of Bhagavan, and avidya, ignorance, is forgetfulness of this. All jivas who, for whatever reason, take shelter of avidya, sow the seed of all sins in their hearts. If we deliberately walk away, once we've heard the truth from Shastra, and then if we choose to walk away, this is even more sinful because you're not sinning in ignorance anymore. Once we understand that illicit connection, etc., or accumulating unnecessary wealth, etc., and all of these things are sinful and detrimental, and yet we still do it. Yes, Aradha, this completely sinful person, and again he will fall into these lower states of life. In the hearts of those jivas who are it's forgetfulness of this. All jivas who, for whatever reason, take shelter of avidya, sow the seed of all sins in their hearts. In the hearts of those jivas who are eternal associates of Bhagavan, there is no seed of sin. One should understand this truth of avidya carefully, instead of imagining an extraordinary myth about Satan. In other words, these sinful desires are coming from me. They're not coming from anything external. The environment is like that. In Kali Yuga, Kali Maharaj is there to encourage the sinful behavior, but always I make the decision. It's always I have it in my hand. If I didn't have it in my hand, how could I get out of it and purify it? I have to accept responsibility. If I'm thinking, no, it's Kali Maharaj giving me a hard time, rubbish. We are giving ourselves, we're not purifying ourselves sufficiently. There is no seed of sin. One should understand this truth of avidya carefully, instead of imagining an extraordinary myth about Satan. It means that it is not an offense to worship the Lord in material elements. Worship of the deity is most essential for those of low spiritual eligibility, and it is particularly auspicious for people of high spiritual eligibility. We see all the Goswamis practically, they all had Thakurjis. Gopal Bhatta Goswami had his beautiful Radha Raman. Rupa Goswami, he has Radha Govindadev. Madan Mohan is worshipped by Sanatan Goswami. Raghunath Das, he worships Gopinath. All the acharyas, they all have their Bhaktivinoda Thakur worships Gaur Gadadhar, principally. Gaur Gadadhar is his worshipable deity, Mahaprabhu. So whether we're Kanishta, Madhyam, or Adhikari, we can still worship the deity and take shelter. Mula, the inclination towards God cannot be stimulated by worship of the deity, because the mind of one who performs such worship always remains confined to the properties of matter. He's an old man, it's stuck in his head, even though we're hearing these truths. But we should, perhaps we might meet someone of this nature, they are fixed in their conceptions, especially if they're older. The conceptions are very hard to purify when we get older, unless you're exceptionally gifted. Gaurachandra, we can understand the defect in your theory by studying the ancient historical accounts of those who became great devotees. Many people began to worship the deity while they were neophytes, but as their devotional mood developed through the association of pure devotees, their realization of the transcendental and conscious nature of the deity also increased, and eventually they became immersed in the ocean of prem. So I think I'm going to stop here. We've gone over our time. I'm remembering the personality of Dhruva Maharaj. Went to the forest with a completely material desire, and he chanted the mantra given by Narada Rishi, and he was focusing his mind on Bhagavan, Om Namo Bhagavate. He was focusing his whole mind on that, and he built a deity as Narada Muni had described him to do. So he was worshipping that, but he had nothing to begin with, and in the end he actually saw Krishna. So this is one example. There are so many. This is a very ecstatic part of the 11th chapter. So I'll just finish actually the answer to this question. We've got a couple of minutes extra. Let me just finish here. The irrevocable conclusion is that satsanga is the root of all spiritual advancement. When one associates with bhaktas of Bhagavan who are fully situated in divine consciousness, one awakens transcendental affection towards Bhagavan. The more this transcendental affection increases, the more the material idea of the deity vanishes, and through great good fortune, this divine consciousness gradually unfolds. Yes, the idea that this deity is made of stone or wood or water, etc., just goes away, and we understand this is a direct manifestation of Krishna himself. All those material considerations are purified away. It vanishes, and through great good fortune, this divine consciousness gradually unfolds. In contrast, the advocates of non-Aryan religions generally oppose deity worship. But just consider how many of them have attained spiritualization, Chinmoy Bhav. They waste their time in useless arguments and malice. When have they experienced true devotion to Bhagavan? All we see are the different wars between the various religious groups fighting on the false ego platform to try and my religion's better than yours, which is really nonsense. So what are they obviously experiencing of any higher appreciation? Nothing. If the Muslims think they have to crush the Christians think they have to crush the Muslims. What is the potency in that? It's nothing. Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Jaiva Dharma ki jai. This should prompt many questions and reflections that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is inspiring within us. Jaiva Dharma ki jai. We've come to page 254, and the Mula is questioning about the deity. And he's still in his mind, even though he's been spoken by Gaurachandra, he's still considering that it's idolatry. We understand he hasn't really captured it yet. Because, understand, this Mula Sahib, he's an older man. He's been brought up from birth to consider certain a certain authority or a certain belief. You don't change that belief just in a moment, unless some incredibly powerful personality like Narada Rishi or someone like that has the ability to transform the heart in a moment. It takes time. So we should also consider in our various teaching to other people that it's going to take time to assimilate these remarkable truths. It takes time to meditate and reflect on the reality of it. So the Mullah is saying on page 254, we read this day before, but I'll read it again because it's just to refresh us. Mullah, the inclination towards God cannot be stimulated by worship of the deity, because the mind of one who performs such worship always remains confined to the properties of matter. It's true. The mind remains contained by matter, unless we have the transcendental relationship of sadhu sangha, which is what we've already mentioned. Gorachand, we can understand the defect in your theory by studying the ancient historical accounts of those who became great devotees. So you have to have some premise, you have to have some platform. So our platform always is those great stalwart Paramahamsas, Mahajans of the past, that we recognize are fully self-realized souls by their acts and by everything, their example entirely. Those prophets, we can say, that's what the Mullah Sahib would call them, prophets. In his language, or in the Christian language, we would call them prophets, but in our language, we say Mahajans. So by their direct, so those prophets of Islam or Christianity, they didn't demonstrate deity worship. It's only these personalities in the Vedic or the Aryan race that are demonstrating this Thakurji worship. We can understand the defect in your theory by studying the ancient historical accounts of those who became great devotees. Many people began to worship the deity while they were neophytes, but as their devotional mood developed through the association of pure devotees, their realization of the transcendental and conscious nature of the deity also increased, and eventually they became immersed in the ocean of prem. And I gave the example last time of Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj went to the forest under the direct order of Narada Muni, and he established a Thakurji, and he began to chant his mantras, and his devotion just increased so much, to such a degree where eventually Krishna came and reciprocated with him because of the um, uh, words of Narad. Narad has said, within 6 months, if you go to the forest, then Krishna will come. So because of Krishna is answering his devotee. The irrevocable conclusion is that Sat Sangha is the root of all spiritual advancement. When one associates with bhaktas of Bhagavan who are fully situated in divine consciousness, one awakens transcendental affection towards Bhagavan. The more this transcendental affection increases, the more the material idea of the deity vanishes, and through great good fortune, this divine consciousness gradually unfolds. In contrast, the advocates of non-Aryan religions generally oppose deity worship. But just consider how many of them have attained spiritual realization. They do have their prophets in Islam, and you can consider perhaps they have attained a semblance. But if they haven't accepted the murti form, the deity form, how can we feel that to be true? Because Krishna himself, in the 11th canto, speaking to Uddhav, he establishes the worship of the deity. It's very pleasing to Krishna. So if Krishna establishes this, and yet the prophets generally, in Christianity as well as Islam, are like perhaps personalities who have attained mukti. They've perhaps come to that stage of the Brahman. But where are the descriptions of the personality of Godhead? They're not actually there in those scriptures. They're not actually describing the personal form. Therefore, their worship is impersonal, ultimately. I have a friend who's watching. His name is Prakashatma. And he, in his material life, he's a Christian priest. He's a Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada disciple. Very advanced devotee. So he will probably have some questions for me today about this. He always picks up on these religious topics. How many of them attain spiritualization, Chinmoy Bhav? They waste their time in useless arguments and malice. These are the followers of these personalities. When have they experienced true devotion to Bhagavan? So we have to have evidence of something distinct from this if somebody wants to prove this is wrong. Mula. There is no fault if one performs internal bhajan of God in a mood of love and externally engages in the worship of the deity. So he's agreeing. However, how can it be worship of God to worship a dog, a cat, a serpent, or a debauchee? Our revered prophet, Paigambar Sahib, has vehemently condemned such worship of material objects. So he can't shift from this restriction, prohibition in the Shastra they have in their Quran. Gorachand, all human beings are grateful to God, no matter how many sins they commit. Occasionally they become aware that God is the supreme entity, and when they are endowed with this belief, they bow down before the extraordinary things of this world. We gave the example the other day of the Aboriginals in Australia. They bow down before the large mountains, the big trees, etc. They're showing reverence, they're showing respect. It's the beginning of the journey to have some appreciation for something greater than the self. Because otherwise, like the material scientists, they get so proud of their own discoveries, etc., they can't see beyond their own consciousness, basically. When ignorant people are inspired by their gratitude to God, they naturally offer respect to the sun, a river, a mountain, or to enormous animals. They express their hearts before such things and display submission to them. Granted, there is a vast difference between this type of worship of material objects and the transcendental affection towards the Lord, Chinmaya Bhagavat Bhakti. Still, when such ignorant people adopt a mood of gratitude to God and reverence towards material objects, it gradually produces a positive effect. That's what I was saying. It's like a stage, step by step by step. We are evolving. First of all, offering respects to a mountain, and then next birth, it'll be to the priests and so on, and gradually, gradually. Therefore, if one examines the situation logically, one cannot ascribe any fault to them. Meditation on the formless, all-pervading feature of the Lord and offering namaz and other types of prayers to an impersonal aspect of the Lord are also devoid of pure transcendental love. Offering the respect to the mountain is devoid of transcendence. Offering respect to the big animal is also devoid of transcendence. It's just like an Aishwarya, I'm in awe of this, but it's not transcendentally connected. And now Gaurachandra is saying that offering these prayers to an impersonal aspect is also devoid of pure transcendent love. So how are these methods any different from the worship of a cat, for example? We consider that it is essential to arouse bhav towards Bhagavan by any means. Bhav is that spiritual, heartfelt, emotional submission and worship. Rag, Mag. Bhagavan by any means. The door leading to gradual elevation is firmly shut if people on any level of worship are ridiculed or condemned. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is not condemning, and he's also advising the mullah, don't condemn. It won't help. Those who fall under the spell of dogmatism, and thereby become sectarian, lack the qualities of generosity and munificence. So we even see this in the Vaishnava, in the devotee communities today. I'm talking about if someone is being very critical of a particular group or anything like that, this is like a sectarian aparad. This is if they are following Srimad Bhagavatam, if they're following the tenets and precepts that we consider the main platforms for our progress, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Ujjvala Nilamani, all the books of Rupa Goswami and our predecessors, if they're following there, then there should be no cause for criticism or sectarian mentality, Well, you're not in my group, therefore we'll fight. That's the tragedy. Those who fall under the spell of dogmatism and thereby become sectarian lack the qualities of generosity and munificence. That is why they ridicule and condemn others who do not worship in the same way as they do. This is a great mistake on their part. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is being very clear here. Don't criticize someone else's worship and just appreciate it. If they're not connecting with transcendence, okay, you understand that, but still they're worshipping a mountain or a tree or a cat or a dog even. Just accept the mood of bhakti, which is beyond worship of self. You understand? A little bit. We have to read this Jaiva Dharma many times to really appreciate it. Mula. Then must we conclude that everything is God, and that to worship anything at all is worship of God? That would mean that worship of sinful objects or the sinful tendency is also worship of God? Do all these different types of worship please God? Good question. Gaurachandra. We do not say that everything is God. On the contrary, God is distinct from all these things. God creates and controls everything, and everything has a relationship with him. The thread of that relationship runs through everything, and that is why one may inquire about the presence of God in all things. God has made all things. How can the thread of the reality of the Lord not be present in all objects? But it's not transcendental to worship a cat. It's not transcendental to worship a dog. It's not transcendental to worship a mountain. There's going to be no reciprocation there of the Lord. It hasn't come in the correct method. If we worship the devotees, who are the repositories of Krishna's mercy, especially the pure devotees, they are with the Lord. They can directly give us the Lord. Vaishnava Thakur, we sing this beautiful bhajan. You can give me Krishna because you have seen Krishna. It's saying like that. The thread of that relationship runs through everything, and that is why one may inquire about the presence of God in all things. As one inquires into the presence of God in all things, one can gradually taste or experience the supreme transcendental and conscious entity. This is expressed in the sutra Jignasa Asvadanavadi. How do you say that? Inquiry leads to experience. We know Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he himself has said, who is a devotee? Then he says, everyone is a devotee. Some know it, and some don't know it. With that kind of mood and mentality, you can walk very freely through this world. And you can offer respects to everybody, because you're knowing, like these Vaishnavas have come out of their recitation of Chaitanya Bhagavat, and they've come to meet with the Mula. It said at the very beginning, the Vaishnavas were honoring Paramatma feature within the Muslims, because they knew they weren't connecting with transcendence. So they were seeing the transcendental aspect within their beings, which is Paramatma. That's what the Vaishnavas were worshipping and honoring, you see. You are all learned pundits. If you kindly consider this matter in a generous mood, you will understand. We Vaishnavas are completely disinterested in material things, and we do not want to enter into long drawn-out arguments. If you kindly permit us, we shall now go to hear the sublime musical narration of Sri Chaitanya Mangal. So the Vaishnavas don't want to debate, they don't want to argue, and more or less Gaurachandra is bringing the whole conversation to a close, because the mullah he's in his fixed position. You can't really change that. He's saying all the enlightening facts. But if he's not generous-hearted and munificent and thinking and listening, he's not going to be able to accept it. You have to be very broad to come into Krishna consciousness. so broad. If we're younger, it's a lot easier, because when you're younger, you tend to accept things more readily. But as you grow older, it's more difficult to accept truths. You need more praman, you need more evidence for the truths, because people get stuck in their ways, so to speak. Oh, getting a message already from Prakashatma. He'll tell me afterwards. He'll probably scold me. It was not evident what conclusion the Mullah Sahib reached. As a result of this decision, after a short silence, he said, I have been pleased to hear your point of view. This is very good. On another day, I will return and inquire further. Now it is late, and I wish to return home. He and his party then mounted their horses and departed for Satsaika Paragon. So it's interesting how Gaur Chand, he already said, we want to leave now. But then the mullah responds and said, but I have to leave. So the mullah is actually the one who's leaving the Vaishnavas. It's etiquette like that. Yeah. The Babajis loudly uttered the name of Sri Hari with great delight and entered the temple to hear the recitation of Sri Chaitanya Mangal. So this is the conclusion of this remarkable chapter. There are so many truths in this chapter. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his birthplace is Birnaga, and he lived here in this place for about 10, 12 years. And it's surrounded by Muslims. So he would have to have constant interaction with Muslims on all levels. But as I said previously, these Muslims are not like those Muslims perhaps in Iran or Pakistan or further away. They're all being greatly influenced by the festivals of the Vaishnavas constantly conducting, Janmastami, etc. They're being given Mahaprasad all the time, etc. So they're getting a lot of influence from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is aware of them as a distinct religious order, and he's taken the trouble to speak about them. Mahaprabhu, he also meets the Muslims, the Partana Vaishnavas, in that chapter, where the Muslims, those riders, they come. You remember the pastime, Mahaprabhu is with Krishnadas, and he's with the Synodian Brahmana, and he's with Balabhadra Bhattacharya, and he's with another Bengali. And it's described specifically in the purport that the two Bengalis are trembling out of fear because they're very timid. But the others, the Synodian Brahmana and Krishnadas, they are very bold in the face of these, because these riders, these Muslim soldiers, are accusing the devotees. This is when Mahaprabhu is on his way back to Varanasi and Prayag after leaving Vrindavan. And he has gone into an ecstatic faint. And they believe, these soldiers, that these other four people have killed him and are wanting to take his wealth, although of course he hasn't got any wealth. But they're accusing them like that. But then Mahaprabhu, he regains consciousness, and he detects amongst these five personalities, there's one who's like a young king or a kingly person. And he's very educated, and Mahaprabhu begins to speak to him about Koda, about God, etc., in the Islam tenets. And he completely captivates this young person, as well as influences the other Muslim riders. And all these Muslim riders, they begin a whole sect called the Partana Vaishnavas. And it's described that they carry this because they've been speaking with the Lord directly, and he's been able to impregnate their heart, change their hearts to understand the reality. Because this young Muslim like prince, he's recognizing that there must be form. This is the first big step to climb over. I can remember, I've shared before many times, going to Istanbul, where the principal meditation is the formless Allah. But we would get big groups of people coming, very pucker people, lawyers, doctors, people like this, professional people. And I would show that universal map to them. And I would always ask them the same question. You all, the name Allah, one of the meanings is light. But what is the source of that light? Where does the light come from? Do we have any experience in this world of light that doesn't have an object to it, where it's manifesting from, the sunlight or the electric light, the firelight, etc.? All has an object, has a source. And they would think about that. And it would really touch them, the conception that there must be an energy where it is coming from, or an energetic, that Shaktiman, just to consider the form, the source of Shakti. And then it would really make an impact on them. So this is what Mahaprabhu did to this prince. He makes this very clear, because the Brahman conception is what they have their faith in, the absolute impersonal Brahman, moksha. And ultimately, from what I've studied about Christianity, they have the same. If we study the Christian mystics, I've read, they are like merging into that light, that Brahman light. And that Brahman light, we understand the dynamic, it's been described, is very warm, very loving. And there's no object that is loving. We just feel a loving atmosphere. But there's no object to the love, because there's no sambandha in that realization of the Brahman. It's impersonal. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he's given us that beautiful essay. Before acquiring material identity, we are in this Brahman place of Shantaras. This is the Shantaras conception. And this is the very best that these religions can actually aspire for. They are aspiring for that. They're like aspiring for moksha. But that eliminates the personality. And what we say in our Falshruti, this ivitrata, you deny yourself the astonishing pastimes of the Lord. You deny yourself the astonishing beauty and speciality of Vrindavan Dham or Goradham, of all the leelas that go on between Krishna's Nitya-siddha parikas, which are just full of the most divine sentiments of Amala Prem Seva that we were hearing about. All this is not even there. So this is greatly all this that I'm saying, this ivitrata, this chamatkar, all this astonishing pastimes, they are all of the transcendental nature. But these other faiths and religions, because they don't accept that, they can't accept that. They're stuck in that impersonal conception. So it's all around us is personalism. We have mothers, fathers, family, etc. We have friends, relatives, right? There's so much personalism that we have. Why should we not consider that Supreme Lord, or where is that personalism coming from in this world? Amongst our various friendships, what?
The personalism in this world gives so much pain, so that's why we all want the liberation from the mukti.
Yes, but I'm just right. Yeah, right. So it's very easy just to be liberated from the pain and have only that idea. I mean, practically all the devotees come to this path because they want to be liberated. They want liberation from the suffering. That's why they come. That's the prompting. They don't come because they've heard about transcendental knowledge. They don't even know what transcendental knowledge is until they come. Rupa Goswami writes about it in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He talks the first about quarter of that book, talking about the bliss of liberation. But then he changes to the bliss of service, because that's the huge transition, where I'm just not looking for my own welfare, my own selfish happiness, but I'm actually concerned with the welfare of others in this world, but as well as the connection with that transcendental world. This connection with others, that wasn't clear. I didn't mean to say that, because that's like a Christian sort of belief that we run around doing good for all people, but they don't understand how can you actually do devotional service to God. And it seems very commendable. you know, that they're helping all people in backward countries and this and that and the other. And this is their mood, this vocational sort of mood. But that isn't transcendental. Don't they think that God himself can look after all the suffering and people like that? Do they have to sort of think that I have to do it? So that's not really devotion. It's devotion to humanity, which isn't devotion, which is not transcendental.